দর্শক আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি ভয়েস অফ আমেরিকা থেকে। আমি আসিনুল হক। আমার সাথে আজকে রয়েছেন ভয়েস অফ আমেরিকার হোয়াইট হাউস করেসপন্ডেন্ট, যিনি হোয়াইট হাউসের ওয়েস্ট উইং থেকে আমাদের সাথে যোগ দিচ্ছেন, ভয়েস অফ আমেরিকার সাংবাদিক আনিতা পাওয়েল। ওয়েলকাম টু আওয়ার শো, আনিতা। হাউ আর ইউ?
Thank you so much.
Now that US troops have been withdrawn from Afghanistan, even though there are still some Americans as well as Afghans who need to be evacuated, but the troops have been withdrawn. What is the latest situation as regards the US and Afghanistan relationship and the US policy for Afghanistan? What is happening next?
Secretary of State Antony Blinken laid this out pretty clearly in his 2 days of grueling testimony on Capitol Hill before the House and the Senate. He identified, I would say, three priorities. One is assisting the about 100 American citizens who are still in Afghanistan who would like to leave. Then also what I guess could be described as reluctant diplomacy with the de facto government of Afghanistan. This is the Taliban-run government. And then also the question of humanitarian aid. As you know, the United States provided about $5.5 billion worth of aid to the former government of Afghanistan for a number of humanitarian concerns.
Okay, so what is happening to the people, the American citizens, the permanent citizens, and the Afghans that need to be evacuated?
So those are two different groups of people. So the Secretary of State said that the United States is in close contact, working very closely with the 100 or so American citizens, the very obviously American citizens who might like to leave Afghanistan, and that is their priority. When you added to that are an unknown number, he would not give a figure, of US affiliated Afghans and people with different status in the United States. We've heard figures between 1,300 and 8,200. That's a bit murkier as to what they're doing, although the US has reiterated a commitment to help anybody who has a valid need to leave Afghanistan and has the paperwork that I guess supports their needs to leave Afghanistan.
So the people who are assisting in the evacuation, some of them are saying that these are empty promises from US administration.
Yes, there has been a lot of backlash, both inside Afghanistan and also outside of Afghanistan on Capitol Hill, as we saw when the Secretary of State was subjected to some very difficult questions. The process has been described as chaotic, as unpredictable, as lacking in rules. And those are serious allegations that, the White House has said this came on us. We didn't foresee that the Taliban was going to take power so quickly. And that's what created this kind of chaotic situation at the airport, as we saw. So it's, the top American officials are not disputing that it is a messy situation, but they are trying to defend their decision to withdraw from Afghanistan.
We also know that there are planes in Mazar-e-Sharif airport waiting to evacuate more people from there. And those planes are also unable to take off.
Right. And there are a few issues. Let me just backtrack and mention one issue that is kind of important, which is that there was a measles outbreak. And so I believe it was midweek that the WHO said there needs to be a 7-day pause on flights coming in from Afghanistan because of this measles outbreak. That's a legitimate health concern. It's a very, very dangerous communicable disease. And that has added to the delays and the frustration in these flights departing. But I think it's important to note also that the US has stressed that they don't have control over the airspace. They do not have assets at any of the airports. And so this is up to officials in Afghanistan who are loyal or at least working for the Taliban government. So they're trying to say, I guess, if this is delayed, that's partially circumstance, this horrible, dreadful measles outbreak, but also they're not in charge of those airports, that transport, or those people. They're not under their authority.
So, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, what is President Joe Biden saying in the last few days?
So, in the weeks since the withdrawal, President Joe Biden has said less and less publicly to journalists. We've all shouted the questions at him about, what is next for Afghanistan, and he has declined to answer those. And so it seems quite clear that the administration wants to move on to this next phase and put this chaotic, messy withdrawal behind them. And so he has hesitated to answer these questions, or just refused to answer these questions from journalists about, what's next? How are you going to work with the government that is completely not inclusive by evidence of the fact that they didn't include a single woman in their 33-person cabinet? These are questions that remain unanswered by the commander in chief. And I guess we will be finding out, as you say, in months to come, which are crucial.
Now that the troops have been withdrawn, the intelligence capability of the United States in Afghanistan has diminished, obviously. How do you think the US administration will continue to monitor the situation in Afghanistan?
I think it's important to note that the director of the CIA visited Afghanistan and Pakistan shortly after the withdrawal to discuss this very thing. And of course, I'm not privy to a lot of those conversations that he had with top officials, but it would appear that what the US is trying to do is try to work through other countries like Pakistan, through the government of Qatar, which has played a very big role in facilitating the negotiations between the Taliban and the American government before the American withdrawal. And so it would appear that what the US is doing is relying on those regional intelligence gathering groups to help them figure out what's going on in Afghanistan, because they do not have eyes directly on the ground.
Since you mentioned the regional intelligence, obviously Pakistan and China, they are working with the Taliban regime, right?
Well, I would leave it to them to characterize their precise relations. But yes, it is worth noting that the Russia and China dominated Shanghai Corporation, I believe it's called, a Russian and Chinese dominated bloc, met with Talib leaders to discuss, a path forward. So it is fair to say that other governments, including China, including Russia, are talking with the de facto government of Afghanistan, that being the Taliban-dominated government. So yes, other countries are saying that they are working with the new government, but I think it would be a stretch for us to say from this distance what they're exactly doing, especially at this early stage in this new government's life.
As regards the domestic politics in the United States, what are the Republicans saying about this situation now?
I mean, I don't even know where to start. It was fierce. The questioning that Secretary of State Antony Blinken took from both House and Senate leaders who are Republicans, it was harsh, it was demanding, and it was very critical. Questions like, how did we not know that this was going to happen, that the Taliban was going to advance so quickly? Why did we still do this when there might have been military advice saying don't withdraw so quickly, or don't use this model of withdrawal? So it has been harsh. It has largely fallen along those political divides, with Republicans heaping on the most criticism. But I think even the Democratic Party would acknowledge that this has been a chaotic situation in Afghanistan, and that is going to have consequences for the people of Afghanistan.
What is happening about the sanctions that are in effect on Afghanistan right now? The sanctions are still there, but the humanitarian aid will continue to flow, right?
Wow, that's a big question for the U.S. Agency for International Development and also the State Department. And the last indication I think we had from Blinken was that they're still working that out. It's a bit of an open question as to exactly how and whether that aid will flow and how it will be handled, because there are obvious concerns. As you mentioned, the Interior Minister of Afghanistan is on a sanctions list and is on a terrorist list. And the United States government does not want to be seen parceling out aid to somebody like that. I don't even think that they can. So this is a sticky, thorny issue that the U.S. has to negotiate going forward.
Thank you so much for your time today, Anita Powell.
Thank you.
দর্শক, আপনাদেরকে ফিরিয়ে নিয়ে যাচ্ছি ঢাকায় RTV স্টুডিওতে। আপনাদের কাছ থেকে বিদায় চাইছি। ভয়েস অফ আমেরিকা থেকে আমি আসনুল হক।